Today we're talking about the biggest single-night massacre in the history of North America. In the capital of Tenochtitlan, on May 22nd, 1520, thousands of unarmed Aztec civilians were killed by Spanish forces. And before we get into it, a quick shout out to Box Lunch. They sent me this beautiful Princess Mononoke shirt, and when I thought of Princess Mononoke and the message of the movie and the violence and greed we see in that movie and what is portrayed towards nature, I immediately thought of this event and knew I had to share it with you. Now, both the massacre and the events leading up to it are well documented by both indigenous and Spanish sources, so I don't want to hear anyone say, well, how do we know this really happened? We do. Now, this might surprise you to hear, but for a time, the Aztec and the Spaniards were actually friends, or possible allies. See, Moctezuma II, who was in charge of the Aztec, invited Hernan Cortez, who was in charge of the Spanish, to his capital, and together they sought diplomacy. They wanted a non-violent end to this possible war. But in the middle of this diplomacy, the Spanish army, the one from Spain, not Hernan Cortez's, came for the head of Hernan Cortez. No, you didn't hear that wrong. Yeah, Hernan Cortez, what he was doing in Mexico this whole war was not sanctioned by Spain. Spain found out, they said, you did not ask permission from the crown, sir. There goes your head. Diplomacy had to get put on lock, so Hernan Cortez could take care of that. And the way he took care of it was lies and deceit. Welcome to the Spanish, okay? What he did was he went to the Spanish army and said, hey, let's drop our guns, okay? Let's just have a friendly exchange. And when they did put their guns down, he picked his guns up, put guns to their head, and said, sign this waiver of diplomacy or I end your life. And they agreed, because they had to. Cortez left Pedro de Alvarado in charge. Yes, the same Alvarado for which this massacre is named. You want to know why it's named after him? Because he, a sociopath who committed hundreds of war crimes, even too crazy for Hernan and the Spanish crown, he's the reason for this massacre. The Aztec came to Pedro and said, hey, every year we have this giant festival. There's like 10,000 of us at this festival. Can you let us have it? We won't have any warriors, no weapons. We just want to celebrate our festival. And Pedro de Alvarado said, sure. And he lied to their face. Once all of the thousands of Aztec nobles and commoners were in this giant courtyard, Alvarado blockaded the whole thing. Once trapped inside this courtyard, the Spanish and their indigenous allies who had relatives and friends at this event started taking their spears and their guns and their swords, and they killed everyone. Men, women, children, and yes, even babies. Alvarado's defense was that he swore that this was a secret war rally. However, no one there, not the Aztecs, not the Spaniards, agreed to that point. The Aztecs said that he did it for greed, as they have accounts of him and his men ripping off the jewels and gold from dead bodies and stuffing them in their pockets. Accounts from the Spanish have no idea why Alvarado did this. They just said, he just did it and we obeyed his orders. Shortly after these events, Hernan Cortez arrived back at the capital and he was pissed. To his credit, he didn't like what had happened. He was pissed what had happened. He was ashamed of what had happened. He didn't want this. He was so close in his eyes to diplomacy that for this to happen, it ruined everything he worked for. Shortly after that, Moctezuma II, the king of the Aztecs, would die under mysterious circumstances. To this day, we have no idea why. After that, his brother got elected, who was very much for war. Hernan Cortez and his men fled from Tenochtitlan. Over half of them died as they ran away, and as they did leave, they left the plague behind, which would go on to kill millions and millions of indigenous people. For those wondering about the modern historical impacts of this, Mexico has still not forgiven nor forgotten about these events, and to this day, they demand that Spain apologize for it. Spain, of course, has stated over and over again that happened hundreds of years ago. It's no big deal, and we're not going to say sorry for it. However, not one, but two popes, because remember, the Catholics did have a hand in all of this, did apologize for these events. They condemned the actions of Spain and said that none of this was okay, and they are very, very sorry for it. For those against critical race theory, but like this video, congratulations, you're now a hypocrite, because this video is critical race theory. This kind of stuff is the kind of thing that some people don't want to be taught in schools. And you have to wonder why. Have a magical day, everyone.